Morning, everybody. This is Anita.
Good morning, Anita.
How are you, Cheryl?
It's a lovely day in the neighborhood.
It is lovely, isn't it? This has been such a nice early fall.
I could take this weather year round.
Yeah, me too. It's beautiful.
Hey guys, it's Cliff. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Clifford.
Good morning, Cliff.
That's what your thing says, Clifford.
Yes, I'm down in central Illinois this morning,
Hmm.
attending a memorial service for my aunt that passed during COVID.
Oh, well,
I appreciate being able to zoom in here. So
yeah. Well, sorry about your aunt, but
celebration of life.
yep.
There you
Yeah. It's good you can finally get around to doing it.
They're from there. She's from Florida and we're down there, but her family is from Taylorville, Illinois. So we're down here.
I know exactly where Taylorville is because there's a prison there, isn't there, dear?
You know what? I don't know that, but I did pass
There is.
Pontiac on it. And hey, Anita, I did get back into Pontiac last Thursday.
Oh my gosh.
My first time since COVID.
Yeah, see, yeah, there's a men's prison, I think medium security in Taylorville.
I did not know that. Thank
There you go. Now you know.
Bingo. Yeah,
For those of you that don't know, Cliff and I do prison ministry. It's not that we're prison junkies. We're just,
Yeah, we had 27 offenders, 27 brothers in Christ join us last Thursday. So I thought that
Wow.
was pretty darn good for the first time back in multiple years.
That's very good. It's very good. Wow. Awesome.
There's so
Cheryl,
many-
how are you feeling?
I'm getting better every day. Thank you for asking. I am now not using the cane at home. I just use it when I go out, just for security, and to beat off people who are trying to rob my hundreds of dollars that I carry out now.
There you go.
Yeah, I was
So
like
it's doing-
security.
It's doing well. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely.
Hey, if any of you didn't catch it last night, there's a show in Aurora called Good Morning Aurora. But last night he did an hour-long segment with Sheriff Hain and Brett Zimmerman and a couple other people, and they were just talking about PTSD and how many people suffer from it now and what resources the county has. And it was really an excellent thing to get into.
Is it
So,
available on
Jamie
YouTube?
Mosher was there. Pardon?
Is it available on YouTube?
It's Facebook, which
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that translates to YouTube. I can send you guys a link if you're interested, but
That
It was
would be,
really,
I would
really
like
good.
that.
Love to.
yeah,
Yes.
and they were so good about saying, you know what, don't let the fact that you can't get in to see somebody for 6 weeks, don't let that get to you. And Ron Hain even said, go to my website, call me direct. I answer phone calls, we'll get you help. And I was like, how often do elected officials, and they were all just like that, and of course, you know how Brett is, but every one of them that was on that panel was just like, we want to help people, we're not going to incarcerate people and it doesn't matter. We're going to help you. And even if you're not in the system, call us and we have resources. So I thought it was
Morning,
just
everybody.
excellent. I was so proud of our group.
Everyone,
I'll send you guys the link.
we're proud of you, Anita. Good morning. I'm Vern Tepe, Chair of the Public Service Committee. It's now 9 o'clock on, what is today? Thursday, August 18th. I hereby call the to order. Let's do a roll call.
Brown,
Brown here.
Leonard,
We're here.
Lewis,
Who is here?
Shepro, Sturgis,
Serge is here.
Kopi, Tepe.
Tepe here.
Yep, Gorm.
May I have a motion for unanimous approval of the minutes for July 21?
Leonard, so moves.
Okay, any objections? So approved. Public comments. I don't see anybody anywhere. Okay, so no public comments. So let's start with the finance department. Who's not here, but their financial reports are attached. Any questions about them? We'll direct them to there. Let's go to the recorder.
Good morning. I sent you all the report. If anyone has any questions, glad to address them.
They know what an event this is. When was the last time you were at committee meeting?
Ooh.
Gee, Pepe, 10 years.
We've been busy in the office.
The donuts drew her in.
You heard there were donuts, right?
In any event, the one note that I would make on the report is that our dock count is down, but our revenue is up. So we're trying to see what's going on, but it's the same thing in all of the different counties. So we're not any different. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, Surges,
Mr. Sargis?
is that Sandy that's in the room?
Yes.
Sandy, I apologize. I think I sent an email to your daughter that found its way to you, and I felt like a buffoon. So you have my apology.
That's okay. We took care of the customer.
Yeah, appreciate that.
And that's the important thing.
This for a client, for a constituent. I'm just like, oopsie.
This may be a strange meeting today. It's starting off that way.
So are there any questions on the report? Okay, so shall we head into the budget? I'm sure that anyone that's familiar with our budget knows that we do a very simple budget for the general fund. Just to remind you, the recorder's office is fee funded. We don't get money from the taxpayers. We actually put all of the monies that come in from the real estate transfer taxes and the recording fees into the general fund. And then we go ahead and we appropriate the amount necessary to run the office from the recording fees that have already been put in. So our projection for 2023 shows that we are projecting revenue in the amount of $4,380,550. We have been receiving very large transfers towards the end of the year, which generally helps to fill those voids. So we're going to hope those continue.
That's a pretty substantial increase, though.
I'm sorry?
That's a really substantial increase in revenue.
It is. We're hoping that it's just going to continue. I've been here for quite a while and we've always met what we have projected. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed that this is going to continue. As you can see, our budget consists mainly of personnel costs. One thing I would like to say is that 3 months ago, I had to replace an employee. That's the first new hire we've had in about 17 years.
Stay around.
They stay there and they know their job. They're very good with the customers. They're very helpful. So I'm really proud to have them there.
Any questions about the budget? Yes, Mr. Brown.
Brown speaking. So speaking of employees, I see for the wages, you've got a 3.52% increase included in 23's budget, which I find interesting because a lot of the departments will include an increase and some won't. And I don't know why the direction wasn't clear of whichever way it should be. Maybe there wasn't any direction. I really wish that all the departments would have put in some type of an increase as Sandy did, because I think that we're all expecting that is necessary to do. So it should be in the budget.
What's a headcount increase?
Actually, we do not have an increase in.
What's the 3.52?
I don't know. I don't have 3.52. I have 11.76.
Yeah, but then you go down to the non-union salaries and wages and
Oh, we were told when we were preparing the budget this year that we were supposed to just carry over the budget from last year. Normally, we're given a percentage to go ahead and add as far as increases for the employees. That didn't happen this year, so we're still working with the finance department to finalize the budget. But this does not include any increase. But you will see that I do have one more for the head count. It's not an additional employee. We're just transferring them from the automation fund into the general fund. So it is an existing employee.
That's, yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I wondered how that worked. Perfect.
Like I said, we've not had anyone to hire in 17 years, so we're pretty conscientious about what we do. And of course, we don't have any real expenditures for contractual or commodities, though primarily the office is run out of the automation fund. And so the only thing that we show here is for the employees. Any questions?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
And if you have any additional questions, just contact me. I'll be glad to try and address them for you.
very good.
Treasurer, Mr. Gilbert.
Good morning. The treasurer's report is on file. Just a couple of notes. Number one, obviously, we're actively collecting the taxes. We're deep into the second payment. We've collected about 19% to date. It's in line. When I walked downstairs the back stairway about a half hour ago, we had 5 cars lined up at the toll box. So that's all going well. You have the notices that are going out reminding people that taxes are being collected. So that's all moving forward. If you have any questions on that, we can do that, but I can move on to the budget for the 2023. As I start my presentation, I would like to acknowledge the 3 people in my office that really make it run. Maria, Chief Deputy, Carolyn, who is the Director of Financial Operations, and she's with me now in the back of the room in case there are any questions. And then the new person, Cindy, Customer Service Manager. We stole Cindy from Cook County, and she's very happy to be with us because, as you know, our taxes are out and Cook County's aren't. So very happy, and I need to make sure that I identify and let you all know that these are the people, directing the office and making it successful. Duties responsible that we collect, invest, and disperse $1.3, $1.4 billion annually. And that includes to over 300 different taxing bodies within King County. Within our office, much like we've got 10 full-time employees. Those 10 employees have put a total of 94 years of service into the county. So we have few employees with a great depth of experience serving King County. We prepare disbursements for account payable, payroll, election judges, juror payments, and we maintain county investments for consideration of safety, liquidity, and yield. Right now, we average about a fund balance of $340 million. That does not include the 80+ million we currently have with the Recovery Act. So I don't know if anyone looks at the numbers close enough and say, hey, where's the 80 million? That's a short-term thing. So here's the organization chart. I told you the people who are behind us. We do have 3 seasonal tellers so that when the taxes are due, we have people hired to help the office flow correctly. And then we also have Della, who has been with the office forever. And in fact, Della was indispensable last year at the loss of Gary. She was able to come in and fill in short time and answer a lot of questions that there were just a lot of assumptions because Gary's always did it. So there's our organizational chart. As I said, 10 people with over 90 years experience in the county. Our budget for 2023, the highlights generally, I did include a salary increase. And across the board, it was 5%. It comes out to 3.91 because as you go from budget year to budget year, Cindy's new. And so her salary was lower than Gary's. So that's why it comes out to 3.91%. But the salary increase across the board, I have it at 5% as proposed in this budget. The other significant, obviously, healthcare, which we don't control. That's a cost across the county. That's up 15.4% year to year. And then we also have some increases, as we've talked about in the finance, about inflation and supply chain. We did have significant increase in costs for paper and products this last tax year, and we've budgeted for that moving forward in case we run into that problem. We are budgeted for $892,326 for 2023, which is a 6.48% increase from the previous year. And I've just talked over this information here. Our revenue comes from the late fees. We have almost $1.5 million in late fees. Those fees are important, not just because it supports the office, but because without some type of penalty, people less likely to pay their taxes online. And we have over 300 taxing bodies that depend on us to collect those taxes and get their money to them so they can operate their government organizations. But that's where a majority of that 1.5 million comes from. The revenue is from collection of late fees. And then we have the tax automation budget. That's at this point the same across the board. We're paying an additional $4,370 for IT support, just a cost that was switched from them to us. And I say us, I mean the tax automation fund. No change from the sale and error budget, $21,000 from year to year. And that's it. Any questions?
Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kilborn, you had mentioned automation on payments. I missed what you were saying. Can individuals pay their property taxes online?
Oh, yes, sir. Pay online through a check, through a credit card. The taxpayer, are incurring the cost of that feature, but it is available to be done online. Online at your bank, through the payment box, into our office.
The automation through computer, what is the cost for that? Do you know?
No, I don't.
Okay. Is that different for every bank maybe, or?
No, it's a straight cost for either the pay by check or credit card.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Thank you. I know you're taking a son to college, so
Thank you.
don't get a speeding ticket along the way.
I'll bring a donut with me in case I need it.
Take one and take one for him. All right, Supervisor Assessments. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, members of the committee. Thank you for having me here today. My monthly report is already in your packet. In the interest of brevity, I'd be happy to just answer any questions anyone has about that before I move to my budget presentation.
Let's go to budget.
Very good. Budget presentation starts on page 53, although the budget is also on page 51 and 52, a summary of that budget. Now I'm going to go through here. Let's see. There we go. Waiting for my clicker to work. There it is. Okay, there are two sub-departments. Sub-department 170-170 is the Supervisor of Assessments. That's the primary functions of the office. We administer assessments, we process exemptions, and we also clerk the Board of Review. That's by statute. Subdepartment 170-171 is the Board of Review. The Board of Review hears assessment complaints and represents the interests of Kane County before the Property Tax Appeal Board. Here's my organization chart for the Supervisor of Assessments side of it all. And as you can see, we have 4 total exempt employees and we have a number of non-exempt. The green at the bottom are seasonal employees. These are mostly students, people we employ to come in and handle jobs like filing, things that don't require any skill or certification. For the employees that are there, I note in passing that I took office just about 16 years ago, and only 3 of those do not predate that. So we have a lot of long-term employees with institutional knowledge. Also, all but 1 of my employees are certified Illinois assessing officers, and myself and my chief deputy have advanced designations as well. The Kane County Board of Review, the org chart is very, very simple. There are 3 members. The board by statute chooses its own chair. The 3 board members are all state certified real estate appraisers, and 2 of them have advanced designations as well. Moving along to the budget. Now, what I'm going to show you is actually a summary of the 2 sub-departments together. The Board of Review budget, with the exception of personnel and appraisals for properties that are going to the Property Tax Appeal Board, we don't have any other budgetary items for that, so it made most sense just to lump these together into one thing. So the overall revenue line that we're looking at an unchanged revenue of $91,653. The majority of that is salary reimbursement, and that is the state reimburses 50% of my salary, provided certain statistical targets are hit. They have been hit every year since I have been here. We see no reason not to project that going forward. Now, I'm going to get to talking about salaries and personnel costs in a little bit. One of the things is if there is a change in my salary, that number changes with it. So in other words, if for every dollar that changes either up or down, the state reimbursement changes by 50 cents, either up or down. For headcount, this does not include the Board of Review number of 3, which is set by statute. So what it's set at is 14. Now, to take a look at some perspective of what that 14 is, let's look at this next page. This is a chart which shows the last 20 years. Now, the reason we picked 2002 as a starting point was that was the year this office and the GIS tech department split, and GIS went under IT. So this gives an apples to apples comparison where we were doing the same thing over those years. You can see in 2002, we had 22 employees. We're down today with 14 and a little bit of seasonal. So the seasonal we have coming on in 2009, and you can see from the budget amounts, that's a minor amount. It's actually money well spent, but you can see we have a considerable amount of decline in personnel. A little bit more about that later, but I wanted to give you some perspective for when I go over that. Now, on the actual salary and wages line, we're showing no change. There is a nominal change because of the difference in the way salary accrual runs. Now, salary accrual is what happens at the end of the year when you have part of a pay period. So you aren't expending that in that year, so you need to account for that. So that's why there's a little bit of a change, but it is nominally the same amount. Now, that's not to say I don't fully, unreservedly support an increase in that amount. But as was mentioned earlier, we're given instructions from the finance department at the beginning of the year. In past years, that instructions, which I believe comes out of your finance committee, gave us a percent. This year, there was no amount given. I understand that's still under discussion, and that's fully within this board's purview. But I want to note that my not putting it in does not mean that is not my intent. That just means it doesn't show up here. This is part of an ongoing discussion. But let's look at historically what has happened with salary, the salary and headcount amount. Now, there's some lines here. The blue line that moves shows the personnel changes over the years. So that gives you a little bit of perspective. The black line is the budget in dollars that are not adjusted by inflation. And you can see there, if we go back to 2009, we actually had a higher budget before inflation is taken into consideration than we did in 2022. But if you account for inflation, that's what the green line accounts for. The green bars go up. You can see the inflation adjusted budget back in 2002 would be over $1 million. And using inflation to adjust it, 2022 was our lowest personnel budget since the office took on its current form. And since before that, it had more people than that, I'm guessing it was for quite a bit before that as well. Now, on non-personnel items, because personnel items are the largest amounts that we have. You can take a look on the next page. If you're following along with a paper copy, this is on page 63. You can see we have a very significant increase in contractual expense, $126,000. That is for one thing only, and that is a state mandated legal publications requirement that comes up once every 4 years. So a little bit about that. This is section 1210 of the property tax code. In every general assessment year, and 2023 is a general assessment year as 2019 was, we have to publish a complete list in local newspapers. So can we bid that out with their several newspapers, get the best deal? No, we cannot. State statute mandates that be paid at 80 cents per parcel. This is not in place of mailing. This is not in place of the email list that we have. This is in addition to all of those. On top of all this, there's a cost for the preamble, the general parts of the fee to publish. But this is the bulk of it. And that's because every property is being reassessed, so we put it in the newspaper. Now, is it a good idea to put it in the newspaper? I will leave that to others to decide. I do have an opinion on this, but I would note this. If you go to my website, canecountyassessments.org, you can search all kinds of people. You can search your neighbors. You can search by name. You can search by address. The newspaper publication has three things in it. It has the parcel number. Quick, anybody here know their parcel number? Raise your hand. Anybody online at home? Okay, I actually know my parcel number, but this is my work. So yeah, most people cannot look up by parcel number. It's one of the biggest phone calls we get. I can't find my name in the paper. At least when you go to canecountyassessments.org and look at the exact same publication, you can look at in a file that you can get Control F on your computer and enter your name, and you can find it that way. So it has your name, it has your parcel number, and then the revised assessment amount. So it doesn't even show you what the change is from last year. That is all set by state law. We can't change it. We can't bid it out. So a good question at this point is, all right, Mark, let's say you're convinced that this is not a good idea. What if we just skip it? What if we just don't do it? What's the damage? Well, that depends. Depends on what happens if someone files a tax objection complaint in the circuit court claiming they have no notice of the reassessment in the general assessment year. If a judge rules, first of all, that publication is mandatory and not directory, and by court ruling, it's already been decided, it is absolutely mandatory, and the judge ruled they got no notice, it is at least theoretically possible a judge will say, you get your money back. So good question, if anyone was thinking and going in that direction, is what is your risk tolerance? What would you be willing to risk as far as county revenues? By the way, when this happens is not right when publication happens. We actually have to go out, do the assessments. People have to pay their tax bills in full. and then file within 75 days of the first penalty date. In this case, that would be September 1st, 2024. And then it works its way through the courts. Meanwhile, another year of assessments happens, and there could be more risk there. It is not my counsel to skip this. So who has to pay this? Well, you'd think with a state mandate, there might be state funds. There is not. As you can see from section 12-25, the property tax goes, the expense of printing and publication of the assessment list shall be paid out of the county treasury. So that means every 4 years, I am required to give you the bill, and we smile and pay it. And I wish I had better news for that. Money is never something that we want to throw around lightly, but this is a one-time increase every 4 years that has to happen. Before I go any further, because I went into this in quite a bit of depth, does anyone have any questions about this publication mandate?
Well, one point, I don't think we will smile and pay it, but we will pay it.
Well, sometimes smiles and snarls look kind of the same from a distance. Gritted teeth. Any other questions? I'll proceed then. We've gone through my budget. I don't want to leave this though with the idea that everything else is perfect and we aren't looking down the road at some challenges. So beyond fiscal year 2023, because I'm not asking for any changes other than the publication budget and then what the county does for everyone for personnel. We have some issues that we're going to have to start resolving. So what I want you to start thinking about is what we're going to be doing next year, because this is going to require some thought. And the best time to do that is during the year ahead of time, not waiting until next August when we're all rushing to get all this done and we're under the gun. So the first thing is what I'm going to call exemption equity. We have $1.2 billion in homestead exemptions alone. Now, this information here comes from the county clerk's website from the tax extension reports. You can see that starting in 2025, I went with the general assessment year each year. We can see how much money was lost by various things. The largest part of this is going to be homestead exemptions, but there are going to be a few other things that are included in this here. You can see we lost $867 million in our tax base to those types of programs in 2005. In 2021, that went up to $1.561 billion. That's 8.75% of the tax base. We're seeing an increasing amount there. Now, what's happening in a couple of other counties, Lake and McHenry, they are employing a new type of technology with a vendor that actually searches for exemptions that people are not entitled to get, and then gives them a report where they can start doing this to put some of the properties back on, get these back on the tax rolls. We did take a look at it. The cost was more than I wanted to recommend, especially without seeing a test. But we're watching what's happening in those two counties very closely, and I may have a recommendation for you next year on how that's done. Perhaps that might even be a good subject for a meeting to demonstrate the product that is being discussed, so you can have a look at it yourselves. In addition to homestead exemptions, we have 7,569 non-homestead exemptions. These would range from government properties to churches to institutions of public charity. Now, to give you an idea of the scope of that, let's take a look at Batavia Township. So this is Batavia Township right now. Just looking in that township, let's see how many properties are off the tax rolls entirely because of these exemptions. There you go. Now, some of this is obvious. That part off to the right, that's Fermilab. If anybody thinks we're going to tax Fermilab, I applaud your optimism, but that's not going to happen. But you can see quite a few other properties there. Now, there are various things that property owners are supposed to do when they have changes in use, changes in ownership. And the fact is, most of them simply don't. We found one property in the past year that was owned by a unit of local government that was leased out to a bank, including having a drive-up window built into the property. So that property is going back on the tax rolls, but that had been off the tax rolls for several years. Now, why is all this important? It's all important because every time the tax rolls are diminished, that does not mean the governments get less money. It means the tax rates increase. And this board has shown an increasing sensitivity, and I think this is a good thing, to property tax rates. So the question is, what can we do in terms of enforcement? What I need is someone to actually head that up. Given the reduction in headcount that we've had over the past 2 decades, simply do not have the staff to do what we do and do that as well. So we rely on people pinky promising that they are doing it all correctly. And at some point, we need to rethink that. It'll be up to this board to determine whether that's something you wish to fund or not. Any questions on the exemptions side of the challenges before I move forward? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, please.
Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
If you find something that, in your example of the bank, can you go back in years or just going forward?
We can go back up to 3 years. And that's under the omitted property statute. There are also other things like in the statute for open space. That's the special deal we give to golf courses where they get a low assessment, even if they're private golf courses that even women can't play in. Yeah, we got one of those. We have one of those laws. We have several golf courses that fit that description. If we find they are no longer meeting that, there's a clawback on that too. Some have clawbacks, some don't. But generally exemptions, we do have varying clawbacks. And generally, though, I would focus more on the going forward than the going back. The biggest issue with going back is now you have to set a value. Now they're entitled to hearings on that value. We want to minimize the expense in adding those properties back on rather than have it just be a wash. We don't want to spend more on enforcement than we do if people just plain stole the money, in other words. Other questions?
Mark, this may not be the most appropriate place, but I know that in the next year or so, homestead exemptions are going from 6,000 to 8,000, and senior exemptions are going from 5,000 to 8,000.
Correct. That goes in line in the 2023 year, so it'll be on the tax bills paid in 2024.
Right. So that needs to be addressed. When?
That'll be addressed for our office internally in 2023.
Right.
Now, the cost of that additional of applying that's simple. That's simply a programming switch. So there's no actual cost to do it. There will be 2 results from that. One is the tax rates are going to go up. Anybody who does not have that exemption in Kane County, whether a person who has a second home or rental properties or commercial properties or small business, or even Farmer Mike, you're going to see an increase in your property taxes. That does not reduce the amount of money government gets. It reduces it changes, everybody else pays more. There's one other issue that's going to come up though, and it's issues cross-county. This increase is only for DuPage, Kane, Lake, McHenry, and Will counties. It does not affect DeKalb and Kendall counties. Now, let's say you take the Big Rock Hinckley School District. It's half in our county. It's half in DeKalb County. That means they're going to lower their overall tax rate, tax base, but increase the rate. That means on the Kane side, the owner-occupied properties are going to get a tax break. Everybody else gets a tax increase. All those homeowners in DeKalb County gets a tax increase. City of Aurora, a quarter of that, because they're in 4 counties, are in Kendall County. The 3 counties are going to get a reduction, but those taxpayers in Kendall County and Aurora, they're going to get an increase. Same thing for any cross-county jurisdiction outside of that Collar County zone.
Maybe sometime in the future, we could have a brief presentation on the key effects that this is going to have on commercial property and residential properties that are non-seniors.
It's a very easy thing to do. It's just a little bit of math. I'd be happy to do that when you've got the time to put me on the agenda for that. It could be either here or, if you think it's appropriate, committee of the whole.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Armstrong, I have a question for you. You said in 23, they're going to start giving seniors homestead exemption is going up. Is it, or is it just
Both.
homestead and senior?
The homestead goes from 6,000 to 8,000.
Okay,
The senior goes from 5,000 to 8,000.
okay.
So that's an additional $5,000 for seniors that own their own homes
Okay.
in the exemption. So it's going to shift the tax burden.
Now, if, say I'm a senior, so I would get that same credit that Vern's talking about, will our rate go up also to counteract that additional exemption?
The tax rates will all go up. See, the tax rate is simply the relationship between the amount of the levy that's extended by the clerk and the tax base. So anytime you reduce the tax base, you increase the rate. Now, you're not going to, since you're not decreasing it uniformly across the tax base, what that means is the people who get the exemption are going to see an increase because of the tax rate over what they would pay if there was no tax rate increase, but it's not going to wipe out that exemption.
It won't equate to. the
Not even
exemption
close.
increase.
What will happen is a significant increase for those who don't have the exemption. And that happens anytime we decide to get a tax break. Now, the General Assembly, that's a political decision. And I mean that in the good sense of the word, related to the word policy in the Greek word polis. It's a political decision. So that's the proper place for it to be made. But everyone needs to understand there is no free money to give out. It all has to come from somewhere.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If there's no further questions, I'll move on to the other challenge that I expect to see in fiscal 2023, and that is changes in taxpayer demand. Now, I've got a data set I've been kicking around with for about a decade and a half, and it uses as a base the Case-Shiller Index. Case-Shiller is a great index of home sales and resales. It indexes January 1st, 2000 at 100. And the chart in front of you shows for the Chicago market. This is a non-inflation adjusted index of what's happened to property values over those years. If you're interested, I can go into why I prefer this over other indexes, but that's kind of inside baseball, so let that go for now. Now, one of the things I've been doing is to show how this relates to assessments by considering the fact that under statute, we're required to assess using a 3-year median level of assessments. So it essentially, as a proxy for that, we're using an average of the prior 36 months of data. So let's overlay that on top and we can see what happens. What we see is the line is smoother. It doesn't peak as high. It doesn't sink as low. It doesn't change as fast. But the interesting thing I want you to look at here is the gap, the variance between those price points. And you can see in 2006, and by the way, this is why I started with this. I wanted to see if there's a way to predict what happened in 2007 and 2008. In 2006, we actually saw a peak gap of 12%, meaning the 1-month data point for Case-Shiller was 12% higher than the prior 36-month average. Usually it's only a few percent different, but here it went way up. Now, if you look all the way to the end, to January of 2022, we are now 15% above. Now, I think this has more to do with lower supplies than increased demand. I think this is going to level off. By the way, if you go back to the projected equalization factors, you'd see we are not 15% above because we use that 3-year level of assessment. So we only changed 5 to 7% from the prior year for assessments. But if we start to see a change, well, before I go into that, let's see what that change looks like. This is what that gap looks like all during that period. And you can see what happened in 2006 and even before the housing crisis hit, this started to drop. This was a good precursor. Now it's not dropping yet. It's still going up even after 2006. If it drops though, we're going to see significant increase in traffic. Give you an example is right now, we are trending out to have between 600 and 700 assessment complaints this year low. In 2013, when we were at the depths of all this, we had 5,480 assessment complaints. If we do that, we're going to need to spend a lot more time, and we're going to need more money, and we're going to need more people.
What year was it?
That was 2013. It's the general assessment year. Now, the general assessment year, assessment complaints always go up because everything gets changed. All the notices are mailed out to everybody who's gotten a change. So we'd expect that. I expect them to increase next year. But if we see this type of reaction in the market, you will see that increase tenfold, which is what happened back then. So we went from 600 now to about 5,400, not about, it was exactly 5,480 complaints. I can easily remember that number. And we have to find a way to hear all of them and still get tax bills out on time, because if the treasurer were here, he would tell you that late tax bills cost more than $10,000 a day in lost interest on first installments.
Mr. Chair, question, if you don't mind me interrupting. Mark, out of those 5,000 some complaints, do you have an idea how many adjustments were made?
We actually, on adjustments, year to year, there's not a whole lot of change in percentage. I track it generally based on class 40. That's single family residences principally. There's also some 1 to 6 family homes mixed in with that, but it's generally houses. And it's generally between 40 and 60% of those who file get a reduction. Now, our complaint rate right now is about 0.5%. So, about half of those. And so we're about 0.25% get a reduction. And that's really consistent with the statistical numbers we're seeing. But if we saw an increase on that, then I would expect due to market volatility, we might see an increase in those who were filing. Even at that high peak, we're still only looking at a filing rate of about 2.5%. I would note that Cook County's filing rate annually is about 33%. So it's still 1,000% higher than we are at our worst.
So what would this effect have on your budget?
It would be mainly need for personnel if we were projecting this goes forward. Now, the good thing is, and the reason why I started looking at this data set is it gives us an early warning of what's going to happen. I also have an algorithm that predicts complaints, and it's generally within 10% of the final number, but I need the first few townships to come in before I have statistically significant numbers. We are not projecting an increase next year that is beyond our capacity to handle. But if we start seeing reductions like what's on the screen now that happened after 2008, that's when it's going to become a problem. It isn't there yet. I'm not asking, like I said, I'm not asking for more money on this right now. I'm simply laying the groundwork for what types of things will make us need more money. And you get to decide whether we get it or whether we decide, we're just going to have late tax bills and deal with that expense.
$10,000 a day.
Yeah.
I beg your pardon?
At $10,000 a day in expense.
There are a
bills.
lot of variables to go into, and you guys get to decide which direction to go.
10,000.
Yeah.
I just want to lay out the facts for you.
First installment, 10,000 a day would be lost for a late issue of tax bills.
Okay. Okay.
That, by the way, net number changes with interest rates. So new interest rates would give us a new number.
That's okay. It's roughly close. All right. Thank you. Any more questions? All right. Let's move on to Regional Office of Education. Ms. Del Santo. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having us. We do have a presentation and it should be up on your screen, I'm thinking. Okay. Forward.
There you go.
Okay. And where am I aiming at?
He's setting you up right now.
Oh, he's setting me up. All right. That's what I like, is getting set up.
Do more in his presentation if you want.
I couldn't. Okay, here we go. Okay, we have a new finance director this year. Julie is replacing Meg Fetzer, who has been here for a number of years in the past. Meg retired from the regional office, and Julie right now is on her honeymoon in Bulgaria. So I will do my best to go through this. And here we go. Okay, the role of the Regional Office of Education is to advocate for education, provide leadership, perform regulatory functions, and coordinate state and local services for educators, school districts, and the community. This is just some highlights of what we did this year in the regional office. We trained 1,671 bus drivers. We fingerprinted almost 4,000 people. We did almost 4,000 school and home visits to families and students, and we issued almost 3,500 new teaching licenses. I'm sure you've all heard about the severe teacher shortage we have going on in the state right now. Elgin School District alone is down 100 teachers that they need to staff their programs totally. In the county as a whole, we're down about 200 parapros. Those are instructional aides in the classrooms. So personnel is a real issue for all of us throughout the county, including the regional office and the school program at the Juvenile Detention Center, which we operate for the county. We have a very difficult time replacing teachers there because it's a challenge, but also they're 12-month people, and teachers like to be a 10-month person. So we have a difficult time keeping staff there. And just as an aside, this is not in our budget, what we pay for the school program at the Juvenile Detention Center. But coming out of regional offices funds, which we generate through the state and through grants, is almost $600,000 that we use to fund teachers. We've replaced most of the furniture over there now, the computers. So all of that comes out of the regional office budget and not the county budget. Okay, this is kind of small, and this is basically what comes out of the general fund. We staff 7 people. We had been at 6 for a number of years. Last year, the county increased our headcount by 1, which added a truant officer for us. We were very grateful for that. We are not asking for any increase this year. Any increases that you see in our budget is due to, I'm not as fortunate as Mrs. Wegman. We've had a number of staff turnovers. We have school districts who pay more money than what we're able to pay, take some of our very experienced staff. And when we've replaced staff, we've not been able to replace them at those same costs, both salary wise and benefit wise. So those are the increases that you see in our budget. Again, there's no increase for 23 for staff salaries. So we're waiting for the county on that, as well as for what the benefits would be. So this is just another way of looking at it. Oh,
So
that's
this is
clerk.
the
That's
portion
the
of-
clerk. That's not mine. I'm going into yours. Sorry about that. You can do yours, okay? I'll pass it on. Does anyone have any questions?
This is the portion of your budget that comes out of the county.
Correct. And what the county pays for are those things that are mandated. So for example, our licensure people that issue licenses for teachers, our health, life, safety inspectors who go out and inspect all of the school buildings to make sure they're safe for kids, as well as right now is a very busy time for us because we're issuing building permits and occupancy permits for all of the construction and things that were done over the summer. Because of supply chain issues, a lot of that is running late. So we're in the midst of that right now.
But trying to understand, your amended budget, which would have included any replacements that you had, was 413,000 total last for 22, and it's going up to 467 for 23. So
These were replacements that were made during the year and just recently. And a big part of that is the healthcare expenses. When we replace people, they have elected at a higher level of benefit than people than we previously
I see.
employed.
Okay.
Okay, so that's where the majority of that is in benefits.
Wow.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah.
Mr. Leonard.
Yes, I was wondering if you could help me understand. I get your point about new employees choosing higher benefits, and that's a big reason for the roughly 46% increase in
Correct.
employee benefits. Do they pay an additional amount also?
Yes.
And so is that just your responsibility? So in other words, the 46% is what we're going to be paying you for the expense that you have.
And the employee pays an increased amount for those increased benefits.
Right.
Is deducted from
This
their
is the
checks.
employer's contribution.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
We don't like that.
I don't like it either.
What can you
I
do?
don't like having to replace staff.
All right, any other questions? Any questions from anybody online? Don't see any hands up.
Hey,
Okay,
Lewis here.
Ms. Lewis.
Yeah, this isn't about the budget. I just wanted to, started discussing it yesterday. Ask Pat, are the schools prepared for starting up and probably an increase in COVID and, getting cleaning and all those kind of things done?
I'm sorry. The amount of money that's going into,
No. I'm not talking budgets at all.
okay,
I'm just talking, I was wondering, we were in public health yesterday and we were discussing that we're all kind of expecting COVID to increase. And I was just wondering if the schools are still on track to do like increased cleaning and still pushing vaccines as we start school again.
well, we're always asking people to be vaccinated but we have a number of lawsuits right now. You may have read that about 100 school districts have been dismissed from those lawsuits because they're no longer requiring masks. But there's still a significant number of districts that are involved because of the staff vaccination requirement, that if staff is not vaccinated, then they need to test weekly. The governor's emergency orders currently go through August 20th. Those are set to be reissued. So it's a moving target right now. But absolutely, they are continuing to clean at those levels that they cleaned at during the height of COVID.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm. And thank you too. I wanted to thank Mrs. Lewis because she's instrumental in working with East Aurora and some vocational programming out there. So hearing very good things about that. So thank you.
Well, thanks. As we roll that out, we are probably going to come and harass you and not harass you, but we'd like to actually, work with some of the other schools too. So we
Sure.
will get to you, obviously.
Okay, I'll be
But,
ready.
Dr. Norrell is awesome to work with, so thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. County Clerk, good morning, Mr. Pollock.
Good morning. Okay, why is that?
Oh, you did that.
I don't, that's my new pitch. You have a copy of the monthly report. We are, okay, why is that doing that? Am I too close? I had a good month in terms of revenue and we are ahead of 2021 right now and in good shape in terms of revenue. Any questions about the report, the normal report? Okay, we'll move on. It's been a tough year for the budget process in our office. With the change to the election cycle, having that compressed schedule instead of having months between the March primary and the November general, having the election at the end of June, everything's really compressed and it's budget time. So that's one challenge. And the bigger one is the loss of, we lost Tom Sherwin, who was our our CPA, our budget guru. Tom did this job for years. When I was on the board sitting in those seats 10 years ago, he was doing the presentations then. And he understood the process backwards and forwards and had a great relationship with finance. This year, you had a group of lawyers doing a budget. And if you know anything about lawyers, we go to law school because we don't want to do math. So it's been a bit of a challenge. Thanks to the finance department for putting up with us and helping us get through this. But one thing I appreciate about Tom's presentations were they were short, to the point, and I appreciate it. And I'm going to try to do the same. You've seen enough long PowerPoint presentations about our accomplishments. You see what we do in our monthly reports. You see what happens in elections. You've seen those half-hour, 45-minute PowerPoints. Mr. Kenyon doesn't want me to do one, so we're going to do this one quick and short and sweet. So if you could pull up that, please. Thank you. Our organizational chart is up. You have the admin chart up there. We do have a vacancy and for Mr. Sherwin's position, and then the org chart for the union staff. We do currently have 3 vacancies. It's been a bit of a challenge. Hopefully now that the new collective bargaining agreement's in and provided that equity for some of the employees, it'll be maybe a little bit easier to fill some of those positions, but we are carrying 3 vacancies on that side. So our headcount is slightly down. In terms of the chart, revenue wise, we're anticipating a slight decrease in revenue. We think that there was a bump this year post-COVID for people that couldn't get married the previous year. So marriage license applications were up, as well as passports, but there still seems to be that urge to travel. So we anticipated the lower amount, but that doesn't mean that we're not hopeful that we'll be able to exceed the expectations. We also have been very aggressive in terms of grants. So we hope that number will be higher as well. We're always looking, and we pulled in more this year than we anticipated as well. We just got another check from the state Board of Elections for $22,900 for another grant reimbursement. So we're going to keep trying, and that hopefully that number will be bigger, and then that gap is smaller. One thing I do want to point out, that 1.13 million revenue estimate, the revenue that we generate covers tax extension, vital records, and passports for all our expenses. Basically, the difference is everything that's mandated, meaning elections. So we generate the revenue to cover everything that we do that isn't mandated, and the cost. So any increases that are up here are basically things that are mandated. We mentioned the head count. If we go to personnel expenses, go to the union wages, it does show a 30% increase, but keep in mind that this does reflect the new collective bargaining agreement that the board just approved. And the budgeted amount, the gap between the budgeted amount and what we're looking for next year, remember there's the budget adjustments, or I'm sorry, the salary increases are retro to December 1st. So that wasn't budgeted last year. So that number is higher because it reflects the retro that's going to go in, and then what the salaries are going to be next year. So everything that was retro to this year plus the increase next year from the CBA is there. That's why that number is a bit higher. Non-union salary and wages is slightly down. We have an open position, and we were able to tweak some things to try to keep that number down. Finally, this year, we did increase, I guess, more accurately budget for election judges. So, and as well, the increased expense of election security, having those teams of judges for when the vote by mail ballots come in, the processing, the signature verification. That was something that we've done in the past, but we've, increased that to make sure as we see the increase in vote by mail ballots coming in. Benefits, that reflects the collective bargaining agreement. and the additional cost of healthcare benefits. It's not as significant as the ROE, thankfully. So overall, that payroll expense line is only up 2%. Non-payroll expenses, the contractual line is higher. There are a few drivers in that. Licensing of some of our software. In the past, we have relied heavily on our automation funds to carry the load where there were additional expenses and other things. You know, we have to look at not doing that, because there's going to be a time, and it's coming up, where we have to make some purchases in automation and not drain those funds for things that may be better used. The automation funds may be better used for other purposes. So instead of having some of those licensing fees come out of there, we're putting them in the budget so that they're taken care of, and we can preserve our automation funds for automation.
I'm sorry, you're saying the contractual expense is going up?
Some of the thing, part of it is for
Because you've been paying for that under other funds?
a special fund, yeah.
So what's included in this, fairly substantial increase in that budget line?
So there's the cost of DevNet, which had not been previously budgeted. It was something that we
Is
just
that a cost of what?
DevNet, which is the software that does our vital records processing, plus it's the tax software as well. So
Okay.
we use it, the treasurer's office uses it, and Supervisor Assessments uses it. There's a portion that we pay for our share that hadn't been in the budget before. Our cost for let me get the breakout in this one.
Whose budget were they in before?
There's the countywide budget,
Was that, which was it?
countywide.
So was this in the IT budget or you don't know?
I don't know.
You're now being charged for it.
Yes. Again, we came into this halfway through this process. And then our license, our costs with our election machine vendor has gone up because the machines are getting older and it costs more to keep them maintained, which is hopefully a reason that we'll be moving towards new equipment in future
So
years.
maintenance for the voting machine,
Yeah.
things like that.
That's a contractual expense. And then see we have some additional expenses. So the mandate you'll be getting a letter, all registered voters in Kane County will be receiving a letter in the next few weeks that's mandated by the state to inform you that you have the option to request a permanent vote by mail status for your ballots. That was something that we're absorbing this year in our budget, but going forward, it's a mandate that those letters have to go out every year. And that's an additional cost. We have to pay for the printing and and then, as well as postage. There was a memo that we had here to finance and to board members to explain the postage costs, but we also have the printing costs as well. So there are some significant drivers there in those additional expenses. But again, these are all things that are mandated. Commodities.
My concern about, if this was in somebody else's budget and it's coming out of their budget, how do we know that? And how do we properly explain that and get the explanation from their budget?
We need to find that out.
Yes, we need to find that out. Would
That's
you?
probably a Roger question.
Or Joe Ansick.
Okay, it's a Joe question, probably.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to pick on you, but you're here.
So that's the difference in the contractual, and then commodities is the same, so that should be it.
Any other questions? Any questions from people online? Okay, thank you.
Thank
Let's go on to Veterans Assistance, Mr. Zimmerman.
Good morning. I will breeze through my report here in the interest of time. One thing worth mentioning, since we're on the topic of budgets today, is that in the month of June that we're reporting on, we brought in more dollars to Kane County veterans than we will get the entire year in tax revenue. So great return on investment there. And then also tomorrow morning, thank you. Tomorrow morning, we'll be hosting a law enforcement training event that I think I talked a little bit about in May or June. We have 10 different law enforcement agencies everywhere from the Illinois Attorney General's office, state police, county sheriff, forest preserve district, local police departments, and even community college police departments coming here to the government center for a 5-hour class on how to engage veterans in crisis and to teach them about the resources available from the VA, as well as to teach them about Veterans Treatment Corps. So we look forward to that, and that was delivered at no cost to those agencies. So great program that is just getting off the ground in Illinois. We're happy to be on the leading edge of that. All right. So for a fiscal year 2023 budget, I'll try to, I know we're late here, so I'll try to breeze through it pretty quick. Very brief organizational chart. We have 4 full-time employees, and occasionally we get work study students that come in that the VA pays for to help us answer the phones and whatnot. That program's fallen off a little bit recently, but our headcount remains stable. And just to show you what our near peer counties, where they're at on full-time equivalents, all of those counties have a smaller population than veteran population than we do. And we're tied for the lowest headcount there. So we're proud of the efficiency that the staff brings. And some of those, like DeKalb County, have a quarter of the veterans we do and have the same headcount. VAC portion of the total budget, we represent about 1/10 of 1%, slightly more this year, 1/10 of 1% of the entire Kane County budget if it were to remain unchanged from last year. Most of that is personnel expenses. That doesn't take a lot of commodities and contractual expenses to deliver veteran services. It takes human capital, training, and having good people in the seats to do that job. Some historical budget facts here. I've been here since 2013. We haven't had a tax levy increase since that time frame. I don't know how far before was the last tax levy increase we've had. During that time frame, we haven't been the benefactor of any new construction increases that the county has realized. We've received about $8,000 or $9,000 in CARES funding and expect to receive little to no funding from ARPA. And our budget during that time frame has been consistently about 1/10 of 1% of the entire Kane County budget. Despite that, our return on investment has been extraordinary. So last year we brought in almost $4 million in new federal benefits to our veterans and their families here in Kane County. And this year we are already at over $4 million in new benefits with 3.5 months left to go. So just an incredible job this year. We're going to set a record on that. That figure is actual dollars that come into veterans' pockets and get spent in the local economy. That's not a value or a savings. That's actual dollars coming in here. And if we were to quantify that another way, for every dollar we received in property tax revenue last year, we turned that into $13 that went directly into veterans' pockets right here in Kane County. A little bit more about what the VA, the federal VA, spends in Kane County annually. This is the last year's expenditure report. So the VA spent $62 million here in Kane County on taking care of our veterans. That's their health care. About 1 in 5 veterans in Kane County use the VA for health care. The VA funded that to the tune of $62 million last year. The $63 million is direct disability payments that about 1 in 5 veterans in Kane County receive. That's actual dollars in the veterans' pockets. Total expenditure, $136 million. Some smaller line items there is GI Bill, life insurance, and maybe some small construction expenses at the VA clinics. Workload versus budget over the last 8 years. Well, we've seen a 227% increase in our workload and a less than 1% increase in our budget. The workload represented here is the number of forms that we complete. It's the best measure of workload that we do. If I file a claim could be a single simple form that goes into the VA, or it could be comprehensive and take 5 or more forms that goes in to explain the whole situation and capture benefits for the veterans. So the number of forms is the best way to quantify the work we've done. And we've increased the number of forms we've done by 227% over 8 years. Pretty phenomenal work by our staff, and also by the IT support we receive, especially Mike back there. He's helped us through some crises. So, but the technology that we're able to leverage definitely saves us some time. So we appreciate their support. There's our budget that you've seen from the other departments, similar format. I highlighted and read the parts that I think we'll want to talk about. One is the $155,000 increase in revenue. That number will probably go down. Right now, we have it put under a property tax increase. The finance department has asked us to give them some flexibility, which is fully within their statutory right to say how they're going to fund us. So that may change there as far as if it comes from property taxes or general fund, or even potentially some reserves. They've asked for the flexibility, and I think that's appropriate. Down to the other two red line items under contractual expenses and transfers out. The state's attorney is reviewing some line items that we pay out, particularly to the information technology. There's the Military Veterans Assistance Act that exists today, requires the county to provide us certain things like postage and telephones and whatnot. Right now, we receive money into our budget that we pay out into IT. It still comes from the same big pot of money from Kane County taxpayers. So the question that they're answering is, should we be getting the money to pay it to IT, or should it just be eliminated from our budget and IT just provides that service? So we're expecting those line items to potentially go down, which would also reduce the amount of revenue that we would need as well. Just a budget comparison again to our peer or near peer counties, despite having the lowest or the highest population in all of those counties except for Lake up there, we have the lowest budget, and that's both last year as well as proposed budget for this year. So continuing to offer great value for the services we provide. I'm going to skip over the changes to the Military Veterans Assistance Act. We've covered most of that, but I put it here just in case we need to come back to it. The biggest increase on the chart you just saw was for payroll increases. And it's important to note that for transparency, that the fair portion of our budget is tied to that the payroll increases. We're all acutely aware that the labor market has changed substantially over the last few years. The increases that we've budgeted for are a market rate adjustment. We're seeing, because of the new law affecting Veterans Assistance Commissions, all of the counties around us are paying their folks more, or going to pay their folks more. And I've already staved off 5 attempts to have my staff poached from other counties. And that's going to be much harder next year if we don't get that market rate adjustment for our staff. And when we put together that market rate, what is the market rate for us? It's actually sort of fascinating. We did our own internal study across Veterans Assistance Commissions in Illinois, looked at comparable positions in time and service, as well as some state of Illinois classifications. The HR department did their separate salary study, I think, that the Human Services Committee has looked at. Our study came in for every position within $1,000 of where theirs did. So we're pretty confident that's the market rate. And furthermore, one of those poaching attempts that's happening, my number 2 is McHenry County is trying to steal my number 2, and what they would pay him at next year is within $1,000 of what we budgeted. So we're very confident that is the market rate there for our staff. And just one more thing worth mentioning, I discussed in June a little bit about some federal legislation called the Pact Act. This is the toxic exposures legislation that went into great detail. That has since become law a little more than a week ago. It increases VA disability payment spending by $153 billion over 10 years, and VA healthcare spending by $102 over that same time frame. It creates many new presumptive disabilities in cohorts that we talked about previously. And I say it will increase our current and client workload. I should say it already has, because since that bill was signed into law last week, Of the 18 claims we filed since Wednesday, when it was signed, 9 of them have been Pact Act related. So that's a 50% increase in our workload, a segment that did not exist before last Wednesday. And that's just the people we could squeeze in since last week. That number or that proportion will go up as we look at that further. So with that, I'll be happy to entertain any questions you might have. I apologize, I didn't introduce my colleague here. This is Andy Belfast. He's the Vice Chair of the Veterans Assistance Commission, which is our governing body. I asked him to come with me in case there was any budget questions that he might be able to answer.
Thank you. I have some comments, and Mr. Surges might want to chime in after I'm done. First off, I want to talk about the fact that the Veterans Commission now reports through our committee as opposed to through to the Human Services Committee or now, and we're very happy that occurred. But key thing is that this committee and the county board no longer approve their budget. Okay. Their budget is approved by their governing body. And as you said, the gentleman sitting next to him is the vice chair of the governing body, and they now approve it. For quite some time, the entire staff of this organization was, in my opinion, seriously underpaid. And, one of the things that Jake will attest that as soon as there was conversation about, them moving, and I knew our committee would be involved, I said one of the things I want to address very effectively is the compensation of his people. We've had veterans come here for the past 2 years on occasion to talk about the fact that their pay should be increased. So I'm personally very, very pleased that this is finally happening. Okay. And we would probably have run into some kind of a jaggernaut because as people know, when I get on some point, I'm not necessarily quiet, nor am I easily deterred.
Understatement.
Okay, so I'm very pleased with that. But another thing I want to say is that to me, it's very important that those organizations that are in some way, shape, or form, with the county should continue to report through the county. And I'm very pleased that that is continuing to happen. And I think it's important that we use that as a vehicle, to keep everybody up to date on what the Veterans Commission is doing. There's a small Veterans Commission in my neighborhood, and they are, very, very active, and all of the veterans, really have a bonding that they do throughout the county. And I think the fact that Jake and his department here just does a phenomenal job for them is just an outstanding achievement. So, I wanted to say that. Cliff, I don't know if you want to join in here or not, but.
Yeah, Vern, I can't concur with you enough. What Jake and his entire team, Jake, I put you on a pedestal, buddy, but it's your entire team that does the yeoman's task here. And
100%.
And Vern, I do agree wholeheartedly that we have championed that in these equity studies. Jake and his team led the pack in the biggest disparity. And we have all, coincidentally, the legislation has stepped in on this, but Jake, we had your back and we were willing to run that up the flagpole for you. On a personal note, it's interesting, Jake, I've had some conversations. My son is a third-year medical school student, and this 2-week rotation, he is serving the VA down at the University of Florida, Gainesville. And he's giving me stories every other evening about what he sees down there. So with that said, I just want to say thank you for all you do. And Vern, I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, Louis, please.
Louis. Yes, please.
Thank you. So I was talking before the thing began, and I wanted to acknowledge Jake. I had the opportunity of listening to I guess it's a podcast last night from Good Morning Aurora is what they call it. And it was on PTSD and mental health. And it was Jake and Sheriff Hain and Jamie Moore and a couple other employees. And they did an excellent job talking about PTSD and mental health and how it's not just the veterans, but of course it is, along with other groups. And what really struck me though was how open they all were. And they said, we don't care if you're a veteran, we don't care if you're in the jail population, if you need help with PTSD or mental health, call us. And Jake actually knew his phone number by heart and, rattled it off. And Sheriff Hayne then said, call my office and I will talk to you directly. But nobody in this county should have to go without help that they need. So I was just very proud of the job they did explaining things and also their openness towards helping people. So thank you, Jake.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. All right, any other questions, comments? All right, I know of no other business. May I have a unanimous unanimous motion to place reports on file?
Leonard, so moves.
Leonard so moves. Any objection? That's done. On
Vern,
other-
Clip Surges here.
Yes, Mr. Sturgis.
Hey, I just, one item during Mr. Pollock's presentation. Vern, during the county board meeting, I had brought up an issue, kind of caught you off guard. That was never my intention, and I think you sincerely know that. I did reach out to the constituents that brought that forward. I have not received anything from them, and that's why I remained silent during his report. And I just felt that maybe I should verbalize that, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right,
I move we adjourn.
there a second?
I second. Leonard second.
All in favor?
I
Aye.